I'm CEO and lead engineer of Proteon Incorporated. And what kind of work do you do here at Proteon? Aside from our meager overhead, almost 100% of our considerable resources goes into one project, which we've been working on for the past 10 years. It's an invention of my own creation that I like to call Schrodinger's tour bus. So, tell me a bit about your invention. In a way, it's exactly what it sounds like. What gave you the idea? How did you get inspired to even begin to make something like this? I've been interested in science for years, particularly quantum physics, and more recently, quantum computing. Certain experiments really piqued my interest, and I spent many of my formative years attempting to recreate them and redesign them in various ways. How much do you know about quantum mechanics? Pretend I know nothing, for the sake of the listeners. That would take too long. If people want to know about quantum physics, they can learn about it on their own time. There's a bunch of theories, and we can talk about them for a month. The most popular one, though, is the many worlds theory. In a nutshell, many worlds states that every decision we make creates a new reality.
That's correct.
And that there are an infinite number of these realities, with more being created every second, every millionth of a second.
There's multiverse, megaverse, and that.
One of these experiments was called the double-slit experiment,
Born.
designed by Thomas Young in 1801. It's repeatable, and it's completely upended the entire field of physics. All of science, really. I've heard of it. Pretty mind-blowing stuff. Can you quickly describe it for those unfamiliar? Absolutely. The idea is, you take a beam of particles, and you shoot it towards a barrier with two slits cut into it. They did this
and black holes,
with an expected result in mind.
they basically go to another dimension.
So they added more elements to
That's how you can go to another dimension.
To quantify the results.
If you don't have the tech to travel to other dimensions,
that's a really tricky
then
one
you
for
go
people to get their minds
into a
around,
black hole, and you go to another dimension.
Sure. I remember doing a double take myself when I heard that the first time. So, the fundamental revelation from that test was that just by observing the experiment, the outcome changed. So what exactly does that mean? Quantum researchers have been trying to decipher that ever since. All kinds of other research and fields of study stem from that experiment and a few others. Schrodinger's cat is one very famous example. Of course, what does that entail? No pun intended. There's lots of videos online that people can look up for themselves. But essentially, you put a cat in a box with something that can randomly kill it. A radioactive substance that has a 50-50 chance of decaying or not. No external influence is allowed. So the idea is that once the cat is in the box, until you open it, it's both dead and alive. If you leave the box closed, the cat will remain forever in a state of being alive and dead at the same time. Only by opening the box do you force the result into existence. By observing it, you make it into reality. So how does this pertain to your invention? Well, the idea was simple. I wanted to make a Schrodinger's cat experiment and flip it on its head. I wanted to see what the cat sees when it's sitting inside that box. According to this theory, when the cat is in the box, it's essentially a waveform. It hovers impossibly between states. I'm being terribly reductive here, and I'm sure my colleagues will have a fit once they hear this. But I'm trying to explain this in a way that people will understand, so that people get what a breakthrough this invention is. You're saying you've done it? You've created something that allows you to observe the things that aren't meant to be observed? Because according to quantum mechanics, it is our experience of these things that causes them to immediately solidify into reality. By looking at them, aren't you disrupting that? We found a way around it. Come on, I'll show you. The four of us get up and follow Garrett. I am accompanied by my photographer, Ramon, who has generously offered his time to assist with the story. Also with us is Garrett's lab assistant, Carrie. She is a specialist in quantum computing and has a host of credentials that tells me she is not new to this field. This CEO has managed to pick some of the best and brightest from the quantum computing and research companies. Carrie is a perfect example of this, as she could easily work anywhere she likes. We make our way out of Garrett's modest office, and he leads us down the hallways towards Proteon's laboratory and warehouse space. The company is still in its infancy, according to Garrett, as the place is clearly a low-budget operation for the time being. All the capital they have is being poured into one thing: the experiment. The Magic Tour Bus, as they've come to call it. Garrett hates that name, and I only hear of it because the receptionists tell me that's what the project has become known as to the various low-level employees not privileged enough to take part in its creation. There are very few staff members walking the halls, I notice, until we arrive at the laboratory and warehouse section where they keep the giant, inconceivable expensive machine. Garrett shows us into the huge space, and the four of us stand marveling at the enormous black tour bus. The windows are completely dark and show nothing of what is inside. It looks like a decked-out ride of a famous rock group, or maybe a politician. Dozens of employees appear to be just finishing loading the bus. They have loaded the back and top of the bus with stacks of enormous water jugs and fuel canisters. Inside the cargo holds are several large crates named MRE, and also appear to be tents, blankets, cold weather gear, and various other supplies. Garrett. Well, here it is. Nazir. It looks more or less like an ordinary tour bus to me, except packed to the grills. What are we doing here? Going on safari? Ha! I just like to be prepared. It must be the Boy Scout in me. Come on, I'll show you what it looks like in there. Are you ready to be a Schrodinger's cat? Just kidding. It's completely safe. So, the idea here is that we're going to go for a little drive, correct? To see the experiment in action, you have to be on the bus and moving? That's correct. Not only that, but we have to be outside of anyone's observation. At least for an hour, maybe more. Sounds easy, right? Well, you'd be surprised. There are people everywhere. We're going to have to get pretty far away from the city. And we can't just sit somewhere. We have to be moving at a decent speed if we want this thing to work. Alright, sounds a little far-fetched to me, if I'm being honest. Well, what are we supposed to see once we get there? Is everything going to turn into a waveform? I wasn't sure what to expect the first time. We've gone out now more than once, and it's never gone the same way twice. Let's just say, you're going to be in for a hell of a ride. Okay, sounds interesting, if nothing else. I'm ready when you are. And you've signed the forms, correct? What forms? At this point, we stop the interview as Garrett seems to realize we never signed some legal documents that his assistant was apparently supposed to have us agree to. I say, I had never heard of anything like that. Garrett hastily pulls out some documents from a nearby filing cabinet and gets us to look them over, saying not to rush. I feel like I can't help it though, as the sheaf of paper he has given us is at least 100 pages long, and he seems to be in a hurry. As the CEO of a tech company, he's already made it clear we're lucky to be having this interview, since he has a lot on his plate. We attempt to interpret the contract as thoroughly as possible, given the time constraints, but find most of it is in legalese. I sign the papers, gently admonishing the men for thrusting this on us at the last second. Ramon does the same. Perfect. Now we can get the show on the road. We're suddenly being ushered along quickly into the bus, where we find a couple of other people waiting inside. They introduce themselves as Ted and Wayne. They say they're journalists as well, for a news outlet I never heard of. So much for my exclusive. The men are both approximately 6.5 feet tall, well-built, with chiseled features. They speak to us briefly before Garrett joins us on the bus, followed by Carrie. The bus is enclosed at the back from the driver, who is in a separate box, it seems. The windows and windshields also tinted and impossible to see through from the outside. I'm not surprised at what is happening, since this was all arranged ahead of time. But the suddenness of it and the extensive legal paperwork being thrust at us is a bit jarring, I'll admit, despite my desire for journalistic neutrality. I try to clear my mind of preconceptions and remind myself that this man is indisputably a genius, as he stands in the center of the aisle near the front and begins to give us a quick talk before departure. Okay, everyone. I have a few rules for these expeditions, which you'll understand once we get out there. I'm going to go over them now. Take notes if you like. But whatever you do, don't forget what I'm telling you right now. Rule number 1. Don't get off the bus unless you get direct permission from me. No exceptions. Rule number 2. Whatever you see out there, don't try to make contact. Don't bang on the glass or try to draw attention to us. Rule number 3. Once we're off the bus, you need to follow my instructions at all times. No hesitation. And that's it. So with that, we'll close the doors and turn ourselves into a litter of Schrodinger's cats. The doors to the bus swing closed, and with that, we're heading out to the open garage door, towards the street. And Garrett takes his seat near the front of the bus, with his assistant Carrie still by his side. I decide this might be a good time to interview the other members of our traveling party, while we make the long journey out to the forested wilderness. I approach Ted and Wayne, who are sitting together at the back of the bus, taking a seat across the aisle from them. I try to brace myself for what I'm about to do. Asking tough questions is the really difficult part of being a journalist. Hey guys, can you stop lying and tell me the truth, now that we're committed to this thing? They look at each other, then up to the front of the bus where Garrett is sitting. He is talking with Carrie and not paying attention to us at all. Ted, what are you talking about? Look, I saw your faces getting ready to leave. You were both terrified out of your wits when that bus door closed. Wayne, you're nuts, man. Who is this guy anyways? We're Schrodinger's cats. He said it himself. Now, I get a very strong suspicion this thing isn't nearly as safe as he claimed it was, and that you both might know something about that. Care to comment, fellow journalists? By the way, is that gun in your waistband standard issue for all writers at your magazine?
I wouldn't ask questions, human.
Wayne, maybe you should mind your own business.
Yeah.
Ted,
if I was
there,
asshole, I would get you killed.
I can feel the back of my neck get hot as I turn around.
I wouldn't care if your friend is
the interview
there.
Not having gone as planned. Ramon is looking at
I
me
would say to those guys,
give him a brief smile.
Kill him.
We spend the next 2
He's
hours
talking too much.
as we finally get free of
Curiosity
all the
gets you
traffic on the
killed.
road.
In the end.
Garrett has a route designed just for this purpose, which is exceptionally quiet. We take another turn, and it leads into the wilderness of a deep and ancient forest, where no other cars seem to travel.
Humans.
A long stretch of nothingness goes by.
They always ask
and I spend my time
questions.
pretending to look out the window, but secretly watching Ted and Wayne. They keep a low profile, barely speaking to one another, except for the occasional hushed whisper. I realized that Garrett exaggerated when he said it would be a couple of hours before the event we would be observing took place. It has been 4 hours already by my count. The trees outside look ordinary, with no indication that any change has occurred, despite our apparent lack of observance from the outside world for quite some time now. Just as I'm beginning to think this is perhaps a hoax after all, we see it. We come over a rise, and there it is. A massive oak tree standing in the middle of the road. It rises up like a monolith as the landscape ahead comes into view. Garrett. Ah, there it is, everyone. The gateway tree. The bus is full of murmuring and surprised whispers as we stare in awe. It's the size of a skyscraper, if not larger, its branches extending into the heavens out of sight into the sky, like dark and living lightning bolts. It takes a long time to arrive at the tree as it seems to come into focus very gradually, like a great city far off in the distance. The black hole between winding tree trunk roots gets bigger and bigger as we approach what I finally come to realize is a huge tunnel going into the tree. We go through and are plunged into blackness. The darkness lasts for a long time, and the murmurs and whispers in the bus turn to gasps and sharp yells of terror, as all the light seems to have suddenly evaporated from the world, leaving us in utter and complete pitch blackness. My heartbeat begins to quicken in my chest, and I feel Ramon grab my arm. He is praying in Spanish. Then, I hear a faint pop. And the sun hits my eyes again. We come out and through the other side of the giant tree trunk. We continue into the endless woods on the other side of the great oak tree. And Ramon and I try to calm ourselves from the strange experience of going through it. I see the trees around us suddenly have grown twisted, evil, and alien-looking, and the sky above is a bruised purple color. The bus begins to slow down, and something catches my eye to the right. Everyone else seems caught up with something to the left of the bus, and they are up from their seats and moving towards the window on that side, gasping at what they see there. But I am transfixed by something on the other side where I am sitting. Something a little ways off in the woods. There are figures moving through the trees, I notice. Many of them, hundreds I think at first. Then realize it is far more than that. The figures turn their heads, and I realized they have stopped abruptly what they were doing, and are focused as a group completely on us. No one else on the bus has seemed to notice them. They begin to cluster together in an insectile fashion, and I realize with sudden panic that the driver has pulled over. We're no longer moving. I had been so focused on the figures in the woods I hadn't noticed the bus had stopped. I suddenly find myself incapable of speech, as terror grips me like I've never felt before. The figures move in organized formation, keeping to the shadows of the malformed trees, the closest ones now sidling up to the bus. As I fumble for words and tremble with fear, Garrett sits back to the middle of the aisle and speaks up in a proud and unconcerned voice. Welcome to the world beyond, everyone.
Have you tried Hungry Jack's bed and brekkie menu?
I'll get right into the next part of the email. I hope you're beginning to see why I'm worried about my cousin Carrie. The worst part of it all, for me at least, is that none of this brings me any closer to finding her. It just leads to more questions without answers. Maybe someone out there with arms fall off the bus one by one, being ripped away by the wind. It seems they have almost no weight to them, as they flutter like leaves and drift off into the sky. The sun is finally shining through, and they seem to have all fallen off the bus after a minute or two of driving. I look back to see the horde of dark shadow creatures still standing in the roadway behind us, their faces watching us as they get smaller in the distance. Nazir, what the hell were those things? Garrett, I have no idea. You'll find there are all sorts of things on this side of the giant oak tree that don't make much sense. But that's the fun of it. Don't worry, you're safe. This bus is impenetrable. How do you know that? If what's on this side is beyond anything we've experienced. We're in another dimension, correct? So they might not play by the same rules over here. So far, we've found all the realms play by the same fundamental laws of physics. Not only that, but they've also had breathable air and quite hospitable environments. It would appear that Earth is a haven for organic life, no matter which reality you experience it in. At least, from what you've seen up until this point. Correct. One other thing that's been the same in nearly every instance is that there are intelligent creatures similar to humans in most of these realms. We've conversed with several of them. You made contact? You actually spoke to a creature from another dimension? Indeed I did. And in English. Just last week, in fact. There was a city about 80 miles from our relative location. I'd like to see if there's something like that here, in this reality as well. That was the first one of its kind we found. A city? Holy shit. There's no guarantee that we'll find the same thing in this place. But it's not so far to go. It's worth taking a look, don't you think? I'm up for the challenge. This is an experience of a lifetime after all. Just promise me that if things start to go south, we'll turn around and get out of here. Deal. I'm glad you're here, Nazir. I think it's time the world found out about this. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I need to speak with Carrie about something. He went back to the front of the bus, where he sat down next to his lab assistant. My photographer Ramon came back over and sat down next to me. He had gotten up to look at the waterfall on the other side of the bus before the shadow people had appeared. I noticed his face was pale and he was trembling. Nazir, are you okay? You don't look so good. Ramon, I took some pictures of the waterfall back there. I was just looking through them and, well, I think you need to see this. What is it? Ramon proceeds to show me the viewfinder of his camera. The screen displays a large waterfall, towering into the heights above. Not a great photo, since it was taken through a window. But then he zooms in, and I see why he was so afraid. There is a large form standing in the trees, watching the bus. It is different from the shadow creatures on the other side, and blends in well with the foliage. It looks like a huge man with the body of a tree. His massive face had a beard made of moss. And he looks acutely aware that we do not belong there.
Because you
His
don't,
arms are crossed,
human.
his brow furrowed and concerned.
If I was there, they'll be afraid of
I
me.
can see why you're a bit shaken up. That thing is
They would
huge,
probably know
and
me,
almost invisible in the trees.
to be honest.
We were looking right at it, and didn't even notice it. Should we show it to Garrett? Maybe it's important. It might be worth mentioning, especially considering the fact that we're
They
surrounded
probably
by
know
trees.
what I'm capable
He
of.
seems a bit preoccupied at the moment, though. Ramon, what did he say to you anyways?
What
He told
are
me he's spoken
alien
to the creatures
species
in other dimensions.
capable of?
He's made contact.
We're not normal
He said he talked to
alien
one last week in a city
species.
in a different world than the one we're in right now. It even spoke English.
We have godlike powers. We don't lose guns. We lose our powers to take control of planets. Press play.
Apparently, we're headed in that direction now. He wants to see if there's something like that here as well.
It will probably back up
If
and
there is,
limp
I'm not sure I want to see it.
if it's shown.
Those shadow things back there didn't seem too happy with us being here. Even the trees look angry.
Like
And
a
the tree person
pathetic
definitely wasn't happy to see
species
us.
it is.
Ted, what tree person? He sneaks up on us quietly without us realizing. He looks at us with his steel blue eyes and appears completely confident, as if it is his job to look after our safety. I suddenly get a feeling what this man's real occupation is. He and Wayne had claimed to be journalists. I realize now they may actually be our protectors. I probably shouldn't have pissed them off earlier. I decide it may be in our best interest to share the information with these men. It doesn't make sense to continue the pattern of lying. Maybe some honesty will have a positive effect. Nazir, take a look for yourself. Wayne, what the hell is going on? Ted, they were trying to hide this. Some tree creature in the woods. I overheard them talking about it. Nazir, we weren't hiding anything. I just finished saying we should share this information with Garrett. Ted, sure you were. Hey Garrett, we've got a situation. He takes the camera and stalks off to the front of the bus. Ramon is about to say something about how it's his equipment the man is walking away with. But I stop him. I'm suddenly picturing a Lord of the Flies situation developing here. I don't like the team dynamics that are being cultivated at such an early stage of our journey. Ramon mentions to me that it's probably a good idea if we go up and talk to Garrett as well. If we don't, then it will be a one-sided story. And coming from Ted, that could be trouble. Garrett, you guys weren't going to share this with the rest of the class? Nazir, we were actually. Ramon was just showing it to me a few seconds ago. We hadn't had a chance to show it to you yet. Garrett, but you were planning on it. Nazir, of course. You're the expert here. We're just along for the ride. Alright, we'll have to be careful. This means not all of these trees are simply trees. Some may be able to ambulate and do quite a bit of damage, judging by the size of this one. Good job catching it on film, Ramon. Can I have a copy of that picture, please? Yeah, no problem. Can I have my camera back now? Garrett nods at that